Hey everyone, my name is Wanaba, and I'm making a video game. For about a year and a half now, I've been working on this project on and off, and it's been the result of taking inspiration from some of my favorite games, which include Noita, Anarchy Online, and Devil Daggers. And later in the video, I'm going to go over and talk about why I'm inspired by each of these games, and what I want to take from each of them. The vision that I have for my project is to create a procedural roguelike FPS set in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world where you as the player are a robot and you'll have to travel through a desert wasteland fighting other robots. And the further that you get, the harder the game will get, and in order to acclimate to the difficulty, you'll have to alter your gun with scraps and modifiers that you'll find through exploration. And the way that you integrate these modifiers into your gun matters, which means that you could drastically alter how your gun operates. And this is the main feature that I've been working on for a while now, and it's going to be the primary way to have fun in the game. The shooting mechanic is a relatively simple system that can lead to highly complex and creative outcomes, given that you understand how it functions. For example, let's take a look at what's currently in my gun. As of right now, there are 4 things that directly modify the way your gun shoots, and those things are the cast delay, which should really be called the fire rate, the recharge time, and the X and Y spread. I'll get to the recharge time in a second, but the X and Y spread determine how accurate or inaccurate your gun is. If you take a look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there are 3 projectiles in the gun. And picture an arrow that is pointing at the projectile that will be shot out once the player shoots. When I fire the gun, the projectile the arrow is pointing at will shoot out, and the arrow will move to the next projectile and the cast delay will trigger. And during this time, you cannot fire the gun. For example, if I had a cast delay or a fire rate of 1 second, I'll have to wait for that second to finish up before I can shoot the next projectile. As I keep shooting, I'll eventually reach the last projectile. And once I shoot that, the recharge time is going to trigger. And you can think of the recharge time as like reloading your gun. And once that's finished, the arrow will move back to the first projectile, and the same sequence will repeat until I change what's in the gun. So what I just did was, I took one of the projectiles and swapped it with a double shot. And the double shot takes 2 modifiers that are after it and groups them into one thing. When I shoot the gun now, it's going to shoot 2 projectiles instead of 1. The other modifier that I have is the projectile trigger modifier. And it's similar to the double shot modifier in that it will take whatever group is next in the modifier list, and it'll output that grouping once the projectile collides with something. Even though there aren't that many modifiers to mess around with, there are already so many combinations possible that fundamentally change how the gun operates. As you can see, I currently have a trigger projectile that will shoot out 2 projectiles once it collides with something. I'm just going to let the footage roll and show some examples that I came up with. There were a few minute mechanics that I didn't explain because I wanted to give a quick overview of the system, but if need be, I'll explain those details in future devlogs. Noita, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever made. I feel that it strikes a perfect balance between traditional gameplay and incorporating unique sandbox and roguelike elements, which when all put together, creates a new gaming experience that really can't be found in any other game. I've sunk hundreds of hours into this game, and during that time, I've come to learn and appreciate the deep mechanics Noita has to offer. One mechanic in particular I'd like to briefly talk about is the wand building system. I've taken direct inspiration from this mechanic because it's just so refreshing and fun to mess with, and the amount of spells that you have at your disposal is virtually endless, and seeing how these spells interact with each other, it's just so fun. And what I love about it especially is that it naturally encourages the player to experiment and tinker with their wands to try and come up with new and exciting combinations that will either help you immensely or just downright kill you. The gun building system I have at the moment is basically a one-to-one replica of the fundamental features of Noita's wand building system. As my system grows and matures, I'll eventually refine it so that it's tailored towards a 3D environment as well as guns, but in essence, it's going to be very similar to Noita's wand building system. There's so much more that I could talk about regarding Noita, from its excellent sound design and unique soundtrack, to its extremely dynamic procedural generation and physics system. But those are things that I'll save for another time. I just can't stress enough how amazing I think the wand building system is, and I'm excited to see how I can shape and evolve it for my game. Alright, enough about Noita. I'd like to talk about Primordia and Devil Daggers now. When I first played Primordia, I was instantly captivated by the game setting and universe. I want to mainly focus on the imagery because it's what inspired the setting for my game. In Primordia, you play as a robot alongside your little robot companion and live out in this wasteland of junk, scavenging around and finding useful objects meant to help you survive. After a robot from one of the remaining robot cities comes and steals your power core, you're set out on a quest to go out and take it back. And on the way, you meet some rather interesting characters and get to experience dystopic yet beautiful scenery. This game has also partially inspired a story for my game, and I think that the gameplay that I'm going for will naturally mesh alongside the atmosphere. I just love the idea of being caught up in a dystopic wasteland and having to scavenge in order to survive. In terms of story, I'm going to keep that a secret in case it's something I want to put into my game. The imagery shown in this game truly gives off the feel that there is no life left on Earth. Everything is desolate, and it's going to stay that way for a long time. Each scene that is presented reinforces these elements and over time allows the player to fill in gaps as to how everything came to be. For example, let's take a look at one of the opening scenes. Right off the bat, you're presented with literally and figuratively a muddy world full of artificial waste. The ground, fog, and sky almost blend together with their smooth and murky textures, as well as their dark and washed color palettes. Aside from the focal point, there is nothing but waste for miles on end. This instantly sets the tone for the game, and I just love it. I want to mold my universe around Primordia's setting and atmosphere, and I hope that I can achieve that at some point. If you're into narrative-driven games that are highly atmospheric, I recommend this one. Devil Daggers. It's probably one of the most addicting games I've played in recent times. Its premise is simple. You're on one platform with one hand that shoots one thing. Daggers. Oh, and I should mention that you only have one life. This game takes the old school arena FPS genre and strips it down to its core elements. The movement in this game feels very fluid and satisfying, and I can tell that the developer spent a lot of time meticulously adjusting it to be perfect. Even with its simple premise, it's a game about pure skill and spatial awareness. Being able to understand how to shoot effectively and predicting your enemy's movements is crucial to becoming good at this game. I also love the art for this game. The retro, pixelized 3D style mixed in with the high contrast and warm reddish hues paints a unique yet hellish arena. I think the developer found a perfect balance between these elements, and it showcases a style that isn't really seen in other games. I think it'd be cool to mix the style with Primordia's setting, so I'm going to try that. I should also mention that the sound design is another subtle, yet polished feature. I would spend hours on end playing this game, and when I wasn't playing it, my inner monologue was littered with the sound of skulls cackling on repeat until I finally stopped at around the 90-hour mark. The refined sounds give the player an acute awareness as to where the enemies are located, and not to mention, the sound design of the spawners sound really cool. All of the layers of fluff are stripped away which are present in most of today's modern shooters, and what you're left with is a game that excels in every aspect. In essence, Devil Daggers is the definition of quality over quantity. Overall, the movement and shooting is very polished, and I want to try and implement a system that feels just as fluid. If you like skill-based shooter games, please try this game. As I began production on this video, there were some other games I intended to talk about, but I think it'd be appropriate to save them for future videos. As for my game, I have a few big features in mind that I'd like to try and complete this year, and in no particular order, I'd like to create prototypes of a procedural map generator, an implant system, refine the player movement, and create enemy AI. I have a few others in mind, but I think these are the most important features to me right now. I'll save explanations for these features for when I create their respective devlogs. My goal is to create monthly devlog videos which showcase the work I've done during that month. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I can't wait to showcase my progress for next month. So with that, I'll see you in the next video.